Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
It goes wide, no icing, good hustle. Byfield to Kopitar for the hat trick. He scores! Anze Kopitar on opening night with the hat trick. 3-1, LA.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings.
Up the right wing, Buffalo shorthanded, clipped into the net, couldn't get a shot away. Now the wraparound. Oh, save made. Kemper on McLeod.
Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back, Kings fans. I am Jesse Cohen. This is All the Kings Men. The 2024-25 season is underway. The Kings are 1-0-1. We've got our first King of the Week, and we have an introduction of sorts with Josh Schaefer. If you haven't heard by now, Josh Schaefer has joined the LA Kings broadcast team from the Ontario Reign, and you'll be hearing a lot more from him moving forward, so I wanted to take a moment to introduce him to you. Josh is an extremely talented broadcaster, and more importantly to me personally, a lifelong Kings fan. Before we get to our King of the Week and Josh Schaefer talk, I wanted to remind anybody listening that Kings Talk, the LA Kings post-game radio show, can be heard live on the ESPN LA app, or heard the following day on the Kings Talk podcast feed. You can find that anywhere fine podcasts are curated. We take calls during the show, but there have been some games where we just don't have access to the phone lines. So I made a text and voicemail line, and I want to extend its use to listeners of All the Kings Men. If you want to weigh in on a topic we discuss, or you want to request a guest or ask a question, or if you just want to yell at me and tell me that I'm a big, loud, wrong dum-dum, go right ahead. Contact us at 747-326-0093. Again, you can leave a voicemail or a text for Kings Talk or All the Kings Men at 747-326-0093. If you do leave a text, it's helpful if you leave your name and where you're from. You don't have to, but just help me out. All right, now that we've got that sorted, let's get to the episode. All right, it's time to crown the first King of the Week, and joining me to do so this week, Josh Schaefer. How are you doing today, Josh?
I'm great, Jesse. How are you?
I'm good. We've been having you on just an awful lot lately, and there's a reason for it, and we'll get into that later. But I did want to acknowledge the fact that like 4 of the last 5 episodes have featured Josh Schaefer.
Yes, they do.
Josh Schaefer will not be the permanent co-host of All the Kings Men, but
All the Kings Men featuring Josh Schaefer.
Yeah, but you will be seeing a lot of Josh as we move forward. So let's go ahead and dive into it, Josh. I explained the format to you yesterday. So we're going to start with you. Who's your honorable mention this week?
My honorable mention is the spirit of competition. No, it was between that and the Dodgers bullpen and the NLDS.
Yeah,
it was
we have
one
to
of those
explain
two.
that I told you yesterday you could choose whatever you wanted. It didn't have to be a player.
Yeah, so for me, it is not going to be a player.
Okay.
It's going to be a collection of players.
All right.
I'm going to go with the decor. I think that through the first couple of games, they've been really good. Obviously, there were so many questions about what was going to happen, what it was going to look like, who was going to, if there was one person who could fill in for Drew Doughty, and there's not, and on or off the ice, no one's going to be Drew Doughty. But the fact of the matter is that through 2 games, and through the preseason too, through 2 games, they've all looked really good. I thought that Mikey Anderson has assumed a pretty big role and has done well. Jordan Spence has done well. Brant Clark has got more ice time. I've been so impressed since the very game Drew Doughty got hurt. I have been so impressed with Kyle Burroughs. And you know what? This decor, along with outstanding goaltending from Darcy Kemper, has given up just 2 goals in 6 regulation periods of hockey. I'm going to count that as a win through 2 games. So for me, my honorable mention is the Kings' fantastic decor through the first, at least at the time of recording, the first 2 games of the season.
You know what? Honestly, I thought you were going to say the penalty kill.
I have considered it.
Yeah, I did not realize this until doing Kings Talk yesterday after the game. The Kings have not allowed a 5-on-5 goal or a power play goal.
Correct.
And that's That's pretty good.
Yes, it is.
So I think that's a perfectly good honorable mention. My honorable mention, though, I usually tend to go this route when it comes up. I'm going with Andre Lee, playing his first 2 NHL games of his career. 7th round pick in 2019, 188th overall. 6 minutes 26 minutes versus Buffalo, 2 shots on goal in 9 shifts. 8 minutes and 3 seconds versus Boston in 10 shifts. When he was on the ice, Josh, his line accounted for 64% in Corsi 4, 63.27% in expected goals for percentage, 5 hits, again, 2 shots on goal. He's playing the 4th line, so you're not looking for him to have like an Anze Kopitar-esque first game in the NHL. But given the role that he was asked to fill, and given the fact that Rob Blake and Jim Hiller both said they didn't anticipate him being on the roster this summer, that he fought for and earned it in camp, I'd say pretty solid showing for the rookie.
Yeah, and you know what? If there's anybody who doesn't really necessarily understand what the Corsi numbers mean or the analytics, and for people who work and we talked about this on one of the last couple episodes I was on, there are analytics in hockey that I understand. There are others that I'm like, oh, well, that number means it's pretty good. That's just how analytics work sometimes. For someone who doesn't know what those mean, it means he's been pretty good, and his line's been pretty good. So absolutely, Andre Lee, he's a great guy. He's a good player. He, I think, has such a high ceiling at this point too, and he's played great, and his line mates have played great too.
Yeah, we'll see how long that line stays together. The broadcasters and coaching staff have mentioned the possibility of certain players getting elevated over others, and also Akil Thomas has yet to check into a game, so we'll see. But so far, 2 games in, Andre Lee, I think, has acquitted himself perfectly well. So that's my honorable mention. Your run, frankly, just before we get into the runner-up, if you and I don't have the same runner-up in King of the Week, Josh,
something's wrong.
This may be the last time you join me for King of the Week. So you're.
Okay, I was afraid you were going to say you better mix it up, or you're not coming back.
No, sometimes you just have to go with the obvious. So you're runner-up this week.
My runner-up is difficult to put this player as a runner-up when they have now passed Alex Ovechkin for the highest scoring player in an opening night game, active leading scorer in opening night games, and with a hat trick to do so for the second time in his career. Only 5 guys have done that. Anze Kopitar is my runner-up this week. I feel like in most other weeks, if a guy has a hat trick, he's probably going to be number 1. But for me, and probably for you, not this week.
Anze Kopitar is also my runner-up. 3 goals, a hat trick in game 1. As you said, his second hat trick on opening night. And it's equally tough because I don't think, well, it's not just me. Nobody thinks the Kings played well on opening night against Buffalo. They didn't have a strong game. Anze Kopitar's hat trick and Darcy Kemper's goaltending got them those 2 points. And in the second game, not a spectacular, well, better than the first night, but I personally still was not blown away by the effort in Boston. But yeah, when you get a hat trick on opening night and you come away with 2 points, you're going to get some recognition. So yes, Anze Kopitar is the runner-up. I mentioned his name, and the fact that he's not your runner-up means he's got to be your King of the Week. Josh, who's your King of the Week?
Yep, it's Darcy Kemper.
Yeah, of course.
It's
All
easy.
right.
I mean, the guy stood on his head. Anze Kopitar said the other night after the game in Buffalo that some of the saves that Darcy made to keep the Kings in the game against the Sabres on night 1 were world-class, and they were. I mean, he had, I mean, when it's the first period of the season and Darcy Kemper is already showing up on all the NHL social media sites with so far like the save of the season, and it's night 1 with his like diving save to go back to the back post and making that stick save, an unreal stop. And then he continued to just do that throughout the rest of the first game and then game 2 as well. And the only 3 goals that he's conceded so far is in 4-on-4, in 3-on-3, and a shorthanded goal that was a breakaway that he made the first save on, and the rebound got knocked out of the air in. Those are the only 3 goals he's conceded so far, so he's my King of the Week. And it, respectfully to Anze Kopitar and his hat trick on opening night, for me it was such an easy decision.
Yeah, unquestionably. I mean, he would have had to allowed 9 goals against Boston to outshine or to undo the performance against Buffalo. He stopped 55 of 58 shots for a .948 save percentage, a 1.47 goals against average, a 1-0-1 record, 2.6 goals against saved above expected, which is goalie fancy stats.
Oh, yeah.
And then this has nothing to do with his performance. I just have become obsessed with this stat. percentage of shot attempts blocked by teammates through 2 games, 24.12%. And just for some context, last year, the goaltender with the best percentage of shot attempts blocked by teammates was 25.84. So the Kings defense is absolutely helping him out. But the biggest thing for me with Darcy Kemper was I was concerned all through the offseason. I know that people were concerned that Darcy Kemper's numbers in Washington,
Yeah.
thank you, were not dynamite. And there had been a drop-off. And the rhetoric had become, well, the same thing happens to all goalies. They struggle, they come to LA, and they're magically turned into better goalies again. But my concern was that Cam Talbot last season had that kind of season, right? A season where his numbers weren't great, and then he came to LA and his numbers were revived. But the Kings paid Cam Talbot $1 million last year and a $1 million bonus this year. So his cap hit last year was $1 million. And Darcy Kemper's cap hit this year is 5 and change. And I just thought, well, there's no way you're going to get a 500% improvement on the performance that Cam Talbot gave you. I'm not going to say that Darcy Kemper's performance was 5 times as good as what we saw from Cam Talbot over the last 2 games. But if that's what you're getting for the next 80 games or however many games Darcy Kemper plays, I don't think there's any concerns. And I don't think, he was fantastic.
Yeah, he was terrific, and he looked like vintage Darcy Kemper. I mean, he looked like Avalanche Darcy Kemper, or even Darcy Kemper when he was with the Kings for that short amount of time. And that's really what they want to see from him. And I know that the numbers dipped, or I guess really they spiked last year for Darcy. He was hurt. He couldn't really get going after a slow start, then got hurt. It was Charlie Lindgren down the stretch for the Capitals and in the playoffs last year. And by all means, he basically willed that team into the playoffs. But again, Darcy just couldn't get going last year. So for me, I came into this season hoping, but also expecting last year to maybe just be a blip on the radar for Darcy Kemper. And if 2 games have told us anything, I want to echo what you said. I'm not trying to get too far ahead of myself, but if that's, I don't think you are going to get these first 2 games from Darcy Kemper for an 82-game season. But if you get something similar when he's in the net, then you don't really have any concerns in the goaltending department. So through 2 games with Darcy Kemper in net, there's a lot to like for what you see with the Kings team going forward.
And to sort of loop your honorable mention into this conversation, one of my concerns in the offseason was with the departure of Matt Roy, with the abandoning of the 1-3-1, and with the introduction of Brandt Clark, this is a team whose defensive identity changed a great deal. I won't say got worse or better, but it changed, right? The 1-3-1 defensive neutral zone structure is basically just a math equation designed to reduce chances against your goaltender. And the Kings played systems and styles and went out and got personnel all designed to boost that equation. Let's reduce chances. Let's cook the books in our favor as much as possible. And then the goaltending department does a fantastic job of coaching up the goalies. Darcy Kemper coming off of a rough season into a new system, abandoning that neutral zone equation, getting rid of Matt Roy, one of your more defensively responsible players, introducing Brandt Clark, a young player, a rookie essentially. I know technically he's not a rookie. So my thought was, oh boy, they're going to be leaking more chances than they did. And so just by math, Darcy Kemper's up against it.
Yeah.
Color me not concerned anymore. I mean, again, it's just 2 games and anything can change in a game. But so far, that was a great performance by me. So congratulations, Darcy Kemper, this week's King of the Week. All right, Josh, let's talk about Josh.
Cool. I'm really good at that.
Yeah, well, I should hope so. You and I have known for a while now what we're about to talk about. We weren't really allowed to talk about it. So we just had you around for, 6 or 7 weeks.
Hanging out.
Without any real explanation. But you are now no longer an employee of the Ontario Reign. You are now an employee of the Los Angeles Kings. You have already been featured on multiple broadcasts. You called some of the preseason games. You've been doing pregame and intermissions on the radio. So congrats to start.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Like you, I grew up a Kings fan, so dream come true. I'm happy to be here. It's been an honor every time I've been involved in the past. Even sitting down to do a little Ontario Reign feature on all the Kings men has been a blast in the past, and I've done that a handful of times. And anytime I've been able to fill in for the Kings on broadcasts or on podcasts or in any type of content whatsoever has been just awesome. And I'm thrilled to be doing that going forward.
So let's address some of the obvious questions that I think will be raised. I've already seen them raised in various places. Nick Nixon announced his intention to retire at the end of this season. I phrase it that way because who knows? I've heard you and I both know certain broadcasters who threatened to retire and then never did.
Although Vin Scully did that like 3 or 4 seasons, and he's the GOAT.
So the question I've seen is Josh the logical replacement for Nick Nixon moving forward? The answer, as far as I know, is we don't know yet.
I don't know.
But you certainly will be. You already have called games for the LA Kings filling in for Nick in previous seasons.
I would love to.
And you've already done some games this season. And heads up, everybody, Josh will call some games for the LA Kings this season. I hope I'm not. I mean, I know we haven't announced that publicly, but it's on our schedule. We know what the games are.
I'm, radio, the games that are on 710. We've already had a few of those already. Be doing those ones, and then if they need me to fill in for Nick, I'll do that. I'm happy to do whatever.
So let's get into this part, because this is something that I don't get it.
What?
You and Faust had this in common, and I think it's a type of person in your generation.
Okay.
I'm lumping you in with Alex Faust. Apologies.
No, I'll take it.
But when I listen to play-by-play announcers, I don't really notice them. And you were asking me about a specific announcer the other day, and I shrugged and I said, I don't know. For me personally, most of them fit into a pretty broad spectrum, which is they're fine. Because most of the time I'm watching the game, and I do like having the voice. It's weird to me if there isn't a play-by-play announcer. But me personally, and maybe I'm in the minority on this one, I don't spend a lot of time analyzing or thinking about how well the play-by-play announcer is doing. If there's a bad one, and we all know who we're talking about, it's noticeable. But the really, really good ones, for example, I think you and I talked about this, I personally don't like Doc Emmerich. And that's just me. I know everybody loves him. I've had this fight with my dad numbers of times. I find him distracting, but that's just me. But I know that you admire play-by-play announcers. I know that you study them. I know that you care about it. I know that you have is passion too strong a word?
No.
For the craft?
Yeah.
Okay. So where does that come from?
For me, it comes from, it's just funny because this is going to be the same as you, but having an opposite effect.
All right.
Growing up in this city had made me very much aware of the people that I was watching and listening to. So growing up with Vin Scully and Bob Miller and Nick Nixon and I grew up a USC football fan, so Pete Arbogast at USC, who is now a friend. Listening to these people growing up, and then I'm a little young for Chick Hearn, but my dad grew up on also Bob Miller and also Vin Scully, but also Dick Enberg and Chick Hearn. So Tom Kelly. I mean, just the fact that you're in the second largest city in the country, with all these major sports brands, historic teams with all these with this rich history of sports in this city, but also the fact that it's the number 2 media market in the country. It's the entertainment capital of the world. Just because of all those things, it makes the quality and the expectations for broadcasting, whether it's the entertainment industry, sports, news, things like that. For me, the expectations were always higher. So growing up with all of these quote unquote, I guess, legendary figures in sports and sports broadcasting, I was always very much aware of them. I, like a lot of people, which is funny because I am not of the generation of transistor radios and things like that, but I used to, when I was in middle school and high school, I had a little clock next to my bed that was also a radio, and I would tune that to the Kings game or the Dodger game, and I would fall asleep listening to the Dodger game when I was in middle school or elementary school or whatever. Same thing with the Kings. So that's kind of where that came from. I would notice myself going to Dodger games when I was young, being more excited to see Vin Scully walking through the parking lot instead of Jeff Kent or Matt Kemp or Andre Ethier or somebody like that. And it was the same thing when I started going to Kings games, because as many people who have been to Staples Center or Crypto.com Arena know, the broadcast booths are on the upper concourse. So after the games, I mean, when my dad and I would go, we would sit in the upper deck, and walking out after the game, we'd run into Bob or Jim or Nick or Daryl, and that was always so cool for me. So it's been awesome to be here the last now 4 years of my life now, and not only getting to call games with Daryl and Jim, but really to get to know the two of them and to get to know Nick on a personal level. And the last couple of years since Bob had retired, being able to just get lunch with Bob, or, you know, just chat with Bob and get to know him a little bit. And it was the same thing with Alex. Like I had met Alex long before he had got the Kings job. And then when I was in college, we had reconnected, and Alex would listen to my tapes when I was in college and listen to my stuff. So getting to know him as well as all these other guys, people that I grew up as a fan listening to, has just been awesome. And that's kind of what continues to fuel me to not only get better at what I'm doing, but also to listen to other people. Like, I'm just a fan of it. And kind of on topic, a little bit off topic, I'm such a nerd and so passionate about this that I have, for no reason other than the fact that I am a nerd, have listened to Spanish radio broadcasts for the Dodgers. And I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker. I understand a pretty good portion, but I am not a native Spanish speaker. But I would listen to Jaime Jarín doing Dodger games on radio if I was bored in Spanish. I've listened to the Habs French broadcast for no reason other than the fact that I think it sounds cool. And like, if I'm in my car, I'll pull up the NHL app and I'll just put on a game. And doesn't matter if I know them, doesn't matter if I necessarily enjoy following any of the other teams. I just like listening to games, and that's something that continues to get me going every day.
Before we get into more questions, I want to introduce this concept, because you called yourself a nerd. I don't think of you as a nerd.
Thank you.
There's a Venn diagram. Well, don't thank me yet.
Oh, no.
There's a Venn diagram that I'm very fond of that identifies the differences between dweebs, dorks, geeks, and nerds.
And you just definitely pulled it up on your computer.
I absolutely did.
I can tell you're looking at
it. So intelligence and obsession combined make a geek. Obsession and social ineptitude combined create a dork. Intelligence and social ineptitude create a dweeb, and intelligence, obsession, and social ineptitude create a nerd.
So what am I?
I don't think of you as being socially inept.
No,
I know you've got friends and a fiance, so I don't think so. That precludes you from being a nerd. I think you fit into the category of geek.
Sure,
you're a play-by-play geek.
Yeah,
and as a different brand of geek, but a geek myself, I respect it, and I'm always very careful.
On that note,
about
without going too far off topic, I also think that quote unquote nerd culture is kind of just pop culture now. It's kind of just social culture. I think that's kind of a thing now.
Now you're poking the bears.
Oh, no.
Nerd culture is just geek culture that's been mainstreamed, which means the intelligence has been removed. So now it's just people who are obsessed with stupid things. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I do want to ask you, though, how old you are, because you have referenced, we've talked about generations a bunch, and I keep telling people you're 23.
That's not true.
As a joke.
Oh.
But
it's okay. Matt McElroy, who's been on this show, tells people I'm 12 all the time. So
I would, but it seems
I'm not 12.
To me, 23 is the slightly less disrespectful way of saying you're 12.
No, I am 26.
Which is preposterously young. Sorry.
What, 12?
No, 26.
Oh.
I almost said 23. No,
sure.
But the reason I bring it up is that you have been calling rain games for 3 years now?
Yes.
Maybe that's why I say you're 23, because when I met you, you were 23.
I was, when we met virtually during COVID, I think I was 22. When I got the rain job full time, I was I still 22? No, I was, I would have been 23. Yeah, no, you were spot on.
It really doesn't matter.
No, you were spot on.
The reason I bring it up is that I never knew what I wanted to do. I never had a career dream. I never had a ambition. I fell into this career ass backwards. When I talk to people like Dieter Ruhl or you or other, I'm blanking on some names that I had locked in my brain as examples of this years ago. When I talk to people who knew what they wanted to do and got after it pretty early, I'm always a little bit jealous, a little bit impressed, and a little bit scared of those people. So how old were you when you really started, were you calling games into a tape recorder or into a digital recorder when you were 12 years old, like yesterday?
I think the seeds had been planted when I was very young, because I played baseball all growing up. I remember like being in center field or being at short, like playing Little League and being like the 0-2 pitch in like my head and things like that. Like to the point where somebody would like slap a grounder at me and I'd be like, hit on the ground to short, Schaefer picks it up, like things like that in my head. So there was that. The more purposeful times I had done that, we had a basketball hoop in my front yard and I would literally go out there and I would play basketball and out loud do play-by-play, or I had a pitchback in my front yard. My dad credits me doing this full time as him getting me a pitchback, which is you put the little strike zone on it and it's like a spring kind of net. You throw it in and it hits you grounders basically. And I would do that in the front yard and do play-by-play. And then I played a lot of video games, like sports video games, where I just naturally started doing it. College football, FIFA, NHL, I would just do the play-by-play over that. And then I really started pursuing it, I would say freshman year of high school was when it kind of like dawned on me that I was like, oh, like this is actually what I want to do. Maybe going into freshman year of high school. So what, that puts me at 14 maybe?
Ish, yeah.
Ish, yeah. So like I knew for sure going into high school at like 13 or 14 that it's what I wanted to do, and I started really doing it sophomore year of high school. There was a broadcast journalism class at my high school. We had the opportunity to, and it was pretty low budget, right? We did a weekly little newscast that was on the school's YouTube page and on the website. I was the sports reporter. It was kind of corny, and it was fun though. We had a good time doing it, but we realized that we had a little TriCaster and the opportunity to stream football games. And I worked with the football program in high school. We got to do like the varsity games every week, just the home games. And by the time I graduated senior year, I had brought my best friend into it, who was a year younger, who could keep this program going after I left for college. And by the time I graduated senior year, we did all the varsity baseball games, home and away. We did all the varsity softball games when they were at home. We did women's basketball home games, men's basketball home games, and then JV and varsity football and men's and women's soccer. And it was just the two of us just doing everything. And it was awesome. And obviously sometimes like we had to sacrifice not doing a soccer game on the road if the women's team was at home. Like the men's team's on the road, women's team's at home, we're doing the women's game. And it also helped that the athletics department was really good, so like every team went on deep playoff runs. We did 2 games from Dodger Stadium in like the city championship games, which is awesome. Like to do that at 15 or 16 years old was really cool. So it kind of started very, very early in high school, and then really started pursuing it in high school, and then in college, I definitely knew that that's what I wanted to do, and that's the whole point of me going to college was that
at Cornell, right?
Yeah, no, I went to Cornell, and then I didn't like it. It was too easy, so I transferred to Harvard, which was also too easy. Yeah. So then that's when I went to Arizona State.
All right.
No, 4 years at ASU.
I really enjoy your call of a game. And one of the reasons that I enjoy it so much is that despite what I said about most broadcasters fitting into a pretty broad spectrum of being just fine, the one thing that I can't stand in a broadcast is play-by-play announcers who scream when a goal is scored, right? Like there's a very fine line between adding inflection to your voice and just absolutely shrieking. And I won't do it on the mic here.
I want to hear it.
Well, there's a difference between Kopitar crosses the blue line, he shoots, he scores, and Kopitar over to Kempe, he shoots, he scores. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's different. I turned my head, so I hope that my screaming didn't blow everybody's eardrums out. But like it's very different. Do you listen to like how many different other commentators have you listened to over the years? Do you consciously craft how you call a game, or is it more just sort of subconsciously coming out of you?
It's a little bit of everything. I think that there's a lot of different reasons for it. So growing up listening to Bob and Vin, as far as I'm concerned, the two best to ever do it in their respective sports. And listening to them, there were things that I think you take, like a little thing here and there, maybe subconsciously, but there will never be another Vin Scully or another Bob Miller. There is nothing I could do to purposefully emulate anything that they did. So I think a lot of it is subconscious. But there are people that I listen to be studious, and there are people that I listen to enjoy. So, I'm a huge Joe Davis fan. Joe's a great guy. He's listened to my tapes before, and the good part about that is whenever he's done that, he has been very critical in a good way, which is the best way to get better, is to have somebody who's very good look at it from a critical mindset to break it down and help you get better. So I love listening to Joe. As far as I'm concerned, he's the best in the business right now, especially speaking from a national perspective. But look, I mean, there are broadcasters that I listen to that show a lot of personality, and in a good way, not like a screaming over the top way. But there are guys that show personality that I love listening to, because then maybe the way that they say things and maybe their tone is something that I could purposefully emulate, and it helps my personality come out a little bit more. So there's things like that. And then there's also the completely, on accident things that come out over the air. I spent 2 summers working in the Cape Cod Baseball League. My partner was terrific. We worked together for 2 years. He's a year younger than me. He went to Syracuse. He is the best partner I have ever worked with or will ever work with. And we got to.
I'm going to clip this and send it to Jared Schaefer.
I'm sorry, Jared, but he was also the same human being as me. We were carbon copies of the same person, and we just got to learn how to do this job together. And it was, at the time, the most professional thing I had ever done. And getting to work with him, he sounds different from me. He has a different cadence than me. He sees the game different than me. But he would say things on the air that me hearing however many times every single night for a summer, home and away, would just become ingrained in my mind, that suddenly I had never said, oh, there's a bloop single to left and that's down for a base hit. He said that all the time, but now suddenly I'm saying that's down for a base hit, and I'm saying that every night. And there were things that I said that came across when he would do that, and it's just very similar. We're listening to Nick, especially from like a puck direction standpoint, has helped me get better, because listening to Nick on radio, he's so good, and he's so, I don't want to say he's slow, but he's very methodical with the way that he describes the game. So for me, I can sit there and close my eyes, and he's not too fast, he's not too loud, but he's still perfectly identifying where the puck is whenever Nick was on the radio in the past. So him telling the story of the game has helped me get better identifying certain areas on the ice. And there are things that Nick does that I very purposely try to put my own style on and maybe implement a thing or two like that into the way that I call a game. So I think that, to answer your question in a roundabout way, yes, I listen to people for a studious kind of reason. And then there are also people that I just try to sit back and enjoy the game. And a lot of times when I'm watching on TV, I will simply just try to enjoy the game in any sport. But if I'm listening on the radio and I'm paying more attention, I feel like I'm being a little bit more mindful of how the broadcaster's saying it, why they're saying it. And I think that is very helpful for me to kind of compile different things that I like, but most importantly, do it the way that I would do it, talk the way that I would talk, because I want to come across as natural and myself when I'm on the air.
When I started in this industry, there are so many unwritten rules and traditions and just customs and things that you have to accept. And I don't like rules. I don't like being told what to do. It's a problem. It always has been. But generally speaking, over time, I get used to it and then I get into it. So like one of the first years I was in the press box, Helene Elliott shushed me. And my natural, my impulsive reaction was to be like, don't shush me. Like, what do you, get over it? I'm having a conversation. It's a press box. It's not a library. Like, what are you talking about? Now, if somebody's phone makes a funny noise in the press box, I want to throw them over the over the edge. Like, I want their credential revoked. I want them out. Like, I am now fully on board with that rule. Being a team employee, being a play-by-play announcer, which is kind of media, but also kind of not, because, yes, the medium that you operate in is the media, but you're not a journalist. You're not independent.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have personal rules or standards that matter to you? And can you think of anywhere where you might have picked them up over your multiple stops?
Yeah, so here's another time where I'm going to use the word nerd.
Yeah, all right.
I am a journalism nerd.
Geek.
Sure.
Yeah.
I love journalism. The Newsroom, great show. If you've never seen The Newsroom on HBO, this is your shameless endorsement for it. It's a little dramatized because it's television, but The Newsroom was a great show. I enjoy telling stories, but also I did go to journalism school. There are a lot of legendary broadcasters that maybe didn't necessarily go to a journalism school, right? Vin Scully started doing this when he was 17 or 18 or something like that, and just kind of landed with the Dodgers, right? But for me, having gone to journalism school and being someone who likes to tell stories, I think it's important to do it fairly, accurately. I don't want to speculate. I hate doing that. When we were in Vegas for the preseason game and Drew Doughty got hurt, that is in no way, shape, or form a time for us to speculate on what. Oh, that looked like he's out for 6 weeks. There was somebody on Twitter who claimed to be a very viable source, who I had not heard of before, but a very viable source who said, "Oh, I'm going to diagnose this as X, Y, and Z," and it was not a Kings. Somebody had no relationship with the Kings whatsoever, and I was just like, "How do you know?
Yeah,
you don't know." And again, journalism geek. You don't know what you don't know, right? So I'm not going to report on something that I don't know. That the game is live. It's fun. I like that it's live because whatever I've said, whatever happens, just happened and it's gone, and we're going to see what happens next. But I certainly do view things a little bit more journalistically. I want to be a good representative of. When I was with the Ontario Reign, I want to be a good representative of the Los Angeles Kings. I've always wanted to do that. But when you're on the air, there are certainly things that I think you have to do the right way. And you have to do it truthfully, and you have to do it honestly, and you have to do it fairly. And, sometimes it's hard because, like, if the Kings lose 10 games in a row, I don't want to get on the air or get on the podcast and be like, it's not that bad.
Right.
But I'm also not going to sit there and trash the team for being terrible.
Yeah, well, you're not an idiot.
I know I'm not an idiot. No, I would hope not.
Yeah.
But like it's things like that.
That's tough.
Those types of things are important because I think it's worth, being fair about it too. And some teams don't like that of their broadcasters. Other teams want them to be fair. But then there are also things that are bigger than the actual game that need to be reported on or need to be talked about on the air. And it needs to be done. And like one thing that we did, and this was horrible, but when Adam Johnson passed away, a former Ontario Reign player, and last season, Jared and I, when we were with the Reign, knew that we needed to talk about it. And we knew that we wanted to do something that was fair and accurate and also honored Adam Johnson's legacy and his time with the Reign. And I was really proud of what we did because we collaborated on it. We asked people with the team what they thought. We collaborated with our producers, obviously. And what we did, I thought, was something that we were both really proud of. That was one of those moments where, like, after we were off the air, Jared and I, like, patted each other on the shoulder, which didn't happen very often. But we, like, patted each other on the shoulder. Like, I think we did that the way that we both envisioned doing it and a way that was fair for everybody involved. And it's things like that I think are super important. But, like, it's the little things, it's the big things. For me, I want to be accurate and I want to be fair. And I want to be very truthful because I do come from that journalistic background where it's important to be all of those things.
I appreciate that a lot. no disrespect to Dennis Bernstein. I have a ton of respect for Dennis Bernstein, but I'm going to use him as an example here just because it's convenient and recent. At training camp, and I think you were there the day that he brought it up, we're sitting around, everybody's watching training camp, and Dennis just sort of is like, hey, do you think maybe they'll look to upgrade their fourth line center position? And everybody there was sort of like, no, we don't. Like, and I understand why you're saying it. Alex Turcotte may be undersized, maybe he's not the ideal player suited for a 4C position, but like that's who they've got. It's him or Thomas at the time. We didn't really know. And like it was just a conversation. Mm-hmm. But that conversation then turned into a tweet, which Dennis has fully said was not him speculating. It was just him, or not him reporting. It was just him talking. But the problem is because he's Dennis Bernstein, who does report things that he's heard and updates things. And everybody in the Kings local media has this issue, including, the team employees. That's why I try to choose my words very carefully. That became a story that I saw repeated in multiple places. Kings looking to upgrade fourth line. It's based on nothing. But you hear somebody say something, and once you hear I think I read an article somewhere that said when you hear or read something 3 times, your brain stops being able to determine whether or not it's true or not. It just becomes true. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure if that's true or not. I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but so I appreciate your reluctance to do that sort of thing. When Drew Doughty got hurt in that game, the next 48 hours were everybody on Twitter was a doctor. Yeah. And it doesn't matter how many times you preface it with, well, I'm not a doctor, but, or obviously we have to wait for results, but then it's like, well, it'll be however many weeks or however many months. And the reality is the reason the month-to-month designation exists is because we don't know. Yeah.
Well, I'll even go back to that. And I don't like doing the thing where it's like, well, we talked about it like this, and this is like really good. But the way that Daryl and I describe this, and I think maybe it's easier on radio because our listeners are not watching the replay over and over of Drew Doughty crashing into the boards.
Sure.
We, of course, are, because it's on the monitors right in front of us. And I think what we did that was good was, he went down awkwardly. Like, that's weird. Mm-hmm. And it happened so fast. Like, it looks like he's holding his left knee, maybe. Like, did he get tangled up with Tanner Pearson? Whatever it is. And then when Jeff Andrews, the athletic trainer, went out to skate with him, Drew sat up as Andrews was running out, and he was like talking to him. So I remember saying like, that's probably that he's sitting up talking to him is a good sign. But then when they helped him off the ice, we're like, and then we look at the replays. And I think what Daryl and I did that was good was we kind of sat there and we're like, well, he goes into the wall, his left skate hits the wall and goes up the wall and goes in a direction it's probably not supposed to go. So, we're going to wait for PR for the actual announcement, and we'll go from there. But as of right now, Drew Doughty's not here. And within 20 minutes, we had confirmation from LA Kings PR that he was done for the rest of the night. And that's what we said. We said it's a good thing that he got up and was helped off the ice. But obviously, he's not coming back tonight, and that could mean a lot of things, and we will let you know when we know. And I think that's the best way to do it. And it's, like, for lack of a better term, it sucks that we don't know what happened. And for the rest of the game, we have to say, Drew Doughty got hurt on the second shift of the game. So, yeah. And then just say nothing else about it. But, like, that's what you have to do because we don't know. Like, we don't know the answer. So that's something that we had to do, and it's difficult. And for me, like, injuries suck. But I think that maybe when it comes to injuries and things like that, that's where I'm very happy to have a journalism background, where when I was in school, my degree was sports journalism. I focused on sports broadcasting, which then focused on play-by-play. But I had to take all of these basic journalism classes. They wanted you to be well-rounded when I was in school. So I like the fact that I would like to think
Sorry,
that...
I'm laughing because the idea of when you were in school being
like 4 years ago.
Like if Nick Nixon told me they wanted us to be well-rounded when I was in school, I'd be like, sure, right. Makes sense. You were in school last week. All right, sorry, go ahead.
But I like that I have a well-rounded, at least in my head, a well-rounded journalism background so that I feel like I can know like when is inappropriate to report or speculate on something. And especially for injuries, you don't know what you don't know.
I want to get into a technical aspect of the job because despite my constantly teasing you for being young, and I apologize. You're incredibly experienced, and not just experienced, but you have a diversity of experience. And one thing that I have learned, as a result of doing this, which is totally different from play-by-play, but I've developed an internal clock. Mm-hmm. And so even though I have the board in front of me right now and I can see we're at 42 minutes, 24 seconds, if it wasn't there, I'd have a general sense of how long we've been going. And that to me has been the number one skill that I've developed, right? People ask me about the job sometimes, or we have other people that you and I work with who want to do it. And I always say, you have to have a clock in your head because you can't just let it run endlessly, but you also can't let it be too short. When I listen to play-by-play teams, I've begun paying more attention, right? The more that I interact with the broadcasters and the more that I'm around it. A play-by-play announcer has to be a ball distributor, a clock watcher, a host, and also kind of I've used the painting frame analogy in conversations with you, in that, when there's entertainment pairs, somebody has to be the frame, someone has to be the painting. Mm-hmm. A play-by-play announcer has to do both at some level, because you are hosting even though the game is the thing that everybody's focused on, your voice is part of the experience, but you're also presenting the entire thing. And you've done, I'm assuming, at least anyway, you've had to do broadcasts solo. Mm-hmm. You've had to do broadcasts with a partner. You've had to do broadcasts in multiple sports at multiple levels, from high school to collegiate to, what was the Cape League? You worked in the Cape League. The AHL, I'm assuming NCAA, now the NHL. You've worked with partners of every different level of experience and personal relationship. How do you juggle all of those responsibilities? And is it any different doing a solo broadcast from doing one with, say, Daryl Evans, who's a professional?
It's very different. It's very different. The first game that I did for the Reign during COVID was solo. Mm-hmm. So I went from graduating college right when the pandemic hit. So I wasn't on the air doing anything for a year, just applying to a billion jobs every day, hoping something would land. And I just got very lucky that I'm here, of all places. But I went from doing nothing for a year to then getting this out of kind of nowhere opportunity to call a pro hockey game as my first thing out of college solo. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I asked people for advice, and they were like, just call the game. It's going to be faster than the college game was, but it's just hockey. Just do the game and just be yourself. So doing games solo, I've done baseball solo. I've done hockey solo. I've done football solo. That's not fun.
I'm sure.
It is high school football. High school football by yourself is not fun.
Yeah.
But I have done games together, and the big thing for me is I didn't play pro hockey. I didn't play pro baseball. I am in no position to be Jim Fox and be Daryl Evans or be Oral Hershiser or John Smoltz or whoever. Just pick somebody. Kirk Herbstreit. Yeah. I'm not that guy. I didn't play the game at the level that these people did. So I don't want to be that person when I'm doing the game solo, because who am I to do that and talk about the game that way? So it's hard, but then working with different partners at different levels is also very, very hard. Because for me and Jared, our best year together with the Reign was the last one, without question. And the second best one was the second one, and the third best one was the third one. Was the first year we worked together. And you just get better. I have noticed that Jared and I were a lot better together on the road when we would show up and not have to worry about producing a TV-style broadcast.
Sure.
Jared would not have to be the public relations guy. I would not have to deal with X, Y, and Z going on in the booth. We would show up, we would sit down, and we would call a hockey game together. And that was the best games we did. Were in Coachella, San Diego, Henderson, anywhere but Toyota Arena, because we had all these other, it's the minor leagues. Everybody's doing everything, right? So when we just got to sit down and talk about hockey together, those were the best games that we had. So it is very different. With Jared, maybe there are different topics or different transitions that we have throughout the game where I would feel more comfortable working with Jared because we had done it every night versus filling in on a game with Daryl. And I think that Daryl and I have a great chemistry now. But when maybe we first started out, this was a guy that I had listened to for a long time and didn't know personally all that well. So how in the world am I supposed to have just genuine chemistry right off the bat with Daryl Evans during COVID with nobody in the building? Like, that was weird. And it's the same thing in college. Like, sometimes in college you get paired with somebody who's a friend of yours that also covers the team that you know really well. Sometimes I'd get paired with somebody that I barely knew. And like, that's just how it works sometimes. So it gets better over time, especially working with one person. But it is, for me, the biggest thing is just you have to be yourself. And like, there have been games that I've done, obviously this was not recent, but in college where like I'd work with somebody that I didn't know and you would alternate the play-by-play back and forth because everyone wanted to do play-by-play, and you would alternate the play-by-play and you were kind of always trying to be better than the other person, which in some instances is good, but in others it's kind of toxic. So when you're always trying to be a little bit better than the other person, even though you don't really know them, how in the world are you supposed to have chemistry with each other? How are you supposed to be relatable on the air? You're not. So I think that that's such an important thing. And like, just being genuine and also knowing that somebody at home is listening to this game for a number of different reasons, but maybe one of those reasons is for entertainment. Maybe they're not super invested in the game. Maybe they are not a Kings fan or a Reign fan. Maybe they're just watching a hockey game, and we need to do something to keep them there, right? So why would we want to seem rigid or not personable or boring or anything like that? I want to be myself because I would like to think that if I met a random person who was sitting on their couch watching a hockey game, that they would like me and want to talk to me. Like, that's the way that I internalize that. And there are also times where like I know that maybe my mom and dad are watching this game. Maybe my fiance is watching this game. Like, what would she want to hear right now? Right? Like, what is interesting to them? How can I describe this that is interesting for somebody that I know is watching the game? So those are different things that I kind of try to internalize that I think hopefully are beneficial for me and my partner. But it's definitely difficult. It gets better over time. It gets way easier over time. And, you know, Daryl and I at the rookie tournament this year, it was the first time he and I had been on the air together, just the two of us, in probably almost a year, because when I had filled in for the Kings last year, it was with him and Jim. So, like, we stepped onto the platform over here at TSPC, put the headsets on, and I felt like immediately we had chemistry again. But it's not always like that. Sometimes it takes a few games, but it's different. You know, everyone does this job differently. Whether you're a play-by-play person or a color analyst or a reporter, everybody does it differently. Maybe there are some standards on how the jobs should be, how the respective jobs should be done that everyone tries to do. But really, everybody's a different person. Everybody has a different style. Everybody does the job differently or the way that they think they should. And at some point, those are all going to overlap. And I think that hopefully I've had that with the people that I've worked with. And for Jared and I, we're friends. Like, when we were with the Reign, maybe it took a little while to get there, but everything was seamless by the time we were on the air for the last time. And, you know, we didn't know that it was the time, but when we sat down to do a game, we were just talking hockey. And like, I think that that's the best thing that you get from it is at the end of the day, you're just sitting down with somebody who has similar interests to you talking about hockey. And I think that's really cool.
You mentioned that you're a Kings fan, and for me personally, that's important because you now work for the LA Kings. You've been here for, I don't know, a month or two at least. You have to have realized how many people that work for this team either didn't live here, you know, growing up, or they're from somewhere else and they're not Kings fans.
Yeah.
I mean, they are now because they work for the team, but they don't have like a background of growing up. But having said that, this is where the age difference does actually make a difference.
Oh, no.
When I was 16 years old, the LA Kings were not good. They'd had one Stanley Cup appearance where they lost 4-1 to the Montreal Canadiens, Marty McSorley's illegal stick, blah, blah, blah. We all know the story. When you were 16 years old, they were a 2-time Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah.
And for, I don't know how old you were, maybe 14, when they were the flagship team in the league. So your experience growing up a Kings fan and my experience growing up a Kings fan are in some ways totally similar, right? Like I'm sure you had the same thing I did, where if you wore a jersey to school, not everybody knew what it was or who the player on the back was. I had a Robitaille jersey and I got a bunch of people calling me Robitussin for a while. But you had a happy fan childhood, and I did not. So favorite players, favorite memories, favorite experiences, what does it mean to you to be a Kings fan?
My first Kings game was 2007.
Mm-hmm.
It was firefighter night or something. My uncle was a firefighter. I don't even remember how we even got the tickets or if he got whatever. But we went, and my childhood best friend was a Kings fan, and his family was also at the game in the same section. Did we get tickets together? I don't know. But we all went to the game. They're losing 4-0 in the third period of the Dallas Stars, and they come back and win the game in overtime. It's a historic game. If you know the game, you know the game. It's 2007, early in the season, I want to say, and Kopitar had the game winner in overtime. And that, for me, was so cool. And even that moment did not make me a diehard Kings fan. I remember one year we had like half-season tickets to the Clippers, and we got them because they were cheap, and we wanted to go to games, and I was a Laker fan growing up, but we went to the Clippers games, had the half-season tickets, and the Clippers weren't supposed to be good. Turned out they were pretty good that year. This is like 2005 or 2006 or something like that, but they had all the double-header games on the weekends, and those were the games that we went to. So whether we were getting there for the day game or getting there for the night game, the Kings were like the other game that night. So I was always like exposed to the LA Kings, even when I wasn't a Kings fan. And then we had that game, and a couple years later, my dad's work, they had Kings tickets, and he would claim the Kings tickets all the time. So we started going, and luckily for me, I didn't have to wait too long as a Kings fan to see a Stanley Cup. But, I mean, my dad wasn't the biggest Kings fan when I was growing up, but in the 90s, just like everybody, he was a huge Kings fan because of Gretzky and because of the team just suddenly being at the forefront of the league, right?
I'm going to jump in here real quick and let you know, and it's not your fault. There's nothing to be done about it. I will always resent you a little bit.
That's fair.
For the fact that shortly after you started following, and there's nothing like that's.
I know.
There's nothing to be done about it. All
yeah.
Right, sorry, go ahead.
But like so he was a Kings fan in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And like that was one of those things where I was like, whoa, like obviously I knew that this had never happened before, but it was not lost on me that like, wow, like 2-3 years into being like an actually dedicated Kings fan, they win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. And then they won it again. And that was really cool. So those moments were definitely, formative moments for me as just a sports fan and growing up and being invested in the Stanley Cup playoffs every year. So for me, those were awesome. There were some games that stand out to me. I was at Game 4, down 3-0 to San Jose. That was fun, and I remember telling my dad after that game that the Kings were going to win the series, and he was like, "Right,
yeah, right."
And they did. I was at Game 3 against Arizona Phoenix in 2012. Mm-hmm. When they went up 3-0,
yep.
And the place was rocking. Mm-hmm. And I was at that game. I was at Game 6 against Anaheim in 2014 when the home team had not won a game that whole series until Game 5 when Anaheim won and went up 3-2. I was like, uh-oh. I was at that game, then sent it back to Anaheim for Game 7. So those playoff runs were just awesome, and I remember all those. And my favorite player growing up was Kopi, which is very odd.
Have you told him that yet?
No, and I don't know if I'm going to.
Eventually, you're going to have to.
I don't know if I can. I can't do that.
Not today, but you've got 2 years?
I don't know. I can't tell
I think
that.
you should.
That's weird.
I think you should eventually.
Maybe one day.
Not today.
Definitely not.
Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow.
Maybe
but soon and for the rest of
maybe
your life.
One day. I don't want to come off as a fanboy though, because I don't want to be.
Here's the thing. And I'm glad you said it that way because this is something that I want you to be as a fan.
Sure,
I want you to be because Bob Miller didn't grow up a Kings fan.
No.
He didn't have an opportunity to. That's not a knock on Bob Miller. Nick Nixon didn't grow up a Kings fan. Jim Fox grew up a King.
Yeah.
But, isn't a Kings fan, right? Like, so many broadcasters And even like Jim Hiller talks about, Jacques Lemaire. No, who's he always referencing? Maybe it's Jacques Lemaire. But everybody who comes to LA, for the most part, didn't grow up here.
Yeah.
And so as a fan, it's really nice. Like, I know that you own a Kings jersey. I've seen you in your Kings jersey. I've bumped into you at Crypto.com Arena when you were just there with your fiance or some friends taking in a game. You didn't work here. You were just out having fun and you wanted to go to a Kings game. To me as a fan, I like that. That means something to me.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, it certainly means something to me too. Just being here now. And I think the one thing for me is being here and being behind the scenes, not just with the Kings, but just in the organization in general. There are things every day where I feel like I have to pinch myself. And then there are other things like walking around the office, you sometimes become numb to the cool things in the office.
Yep.
And like the other day, I was walking around and there's a part in the office, you know where it is, obviously. There's a part in the office where they have the score sheets from all of these like historic games in Kings history. I have walked by those score sheets 1,000 times in the 4 years that I've worked for this organization. I have looked at them and seen 6-2 win over the Devils, Game 6, 2012, Kings win the Stanley Cup. I have seen that 1,000 times. I've seen the stat sheet that is handwritten from the first ever Kings game at Long Beach Arena. I've seen that, right? But like the other day I walked past it and I look at like that game. First of all, the cool one is when you look at the Miracle on Manchester, because there's a score sheet of the Miracle on Manchester. It is very cool to look and see D. Evans handwritten into the overtime section. Like, that is cool. And that was something that I was like, whoa, like, that's awesome. And then like going and looking at the other one and sees like Matt Green, like 6-2 scored the last goal from the blue line or whatever. Like, I see that and I remember that moment and I remember the broadcast of the call of that. And like, I remember listening back to the taped broadcast from Bob and Jim. Like, I know what that sounded like. So those are things that are cool, which for me working here, sometimes you become numb to those things.
Do you know about the random filing cabinet full of game sheets?
No.
All right, I'll show it to you as soon as we're done recording.
No way.
We stumbled onto it by accident. We were like, why is this filing cabinet just full of old game sheets?
Wow. What I want is the archive of every broadcast going back to the 1960s is what I want. But
I'm slowly trying to build it.
Yeah. So. But those things do become numb to you.
Yeah.
But then they just appear. And then you think like, whoa, like that is actually really cool. And as a Kings fan growing up, like there are things that to this day I think are awesome. But like there are also games where like the Kings lose in Boston the other night. 10 years ago, 16-year-old Josh would have been like, and now I'm like, they play on Monday.
Yeah. Like
things like that. Because at some point it's a job, but it's also the coolest job in the world for me.
Yeah.
So, and it, I could be, what?
All due respect, one thing I've learned, and it sounds to me, I don't know your employment history, but I'm going to guess you haven't had many jobs outside of broadcasting.
No. Well, no.
Okay. I've had a ton of weird jobs, and the one thing I've learned is that every job, and I've sold shoes, I've delivered produce, I've done concert security, I've done data entry, I've done dock work.
You've done dock work?
Yeah, I've done a lot of weird jobs in Alaska.
What?
Conversation for another day.
Okay.
Anyway, I've had a lot of weird jobs, and they all have one thing in common, which is they're jobs and they suck. Yeah. Right? Jobs suck. This job has, as loath as I am to admit it, there are moments in this job that suck. However, and I'm sure you can relate to this part, the upside, right? The good days at this job, like a good day working the docks in Alaska, not that good a day.
No.
It's pretty brutal. Nothing went wrong and you didn't get hurt. That was kind of like the best day doing that job. But yeah, here, the best day is you got to go to a hockey game for the team that you love. You got to see a player that you've known and rooted for score a hat trick. You got to see a dramatic win. You got to see a playoff win, whatever it is. The upsides are amazing, right? Somebody told you that you really changed, their week, that you had an impact on them. You get to, for me, getting to give other people an experience that they'll remember is you don't get that when you're delivering produce.
Yeah. A lot of people internally in the organization know this. And a lot of Reign fans, I think, know this because they probably would have talked to me about this at some point. But I also sold group tickets and business outings with the Ontario Reign. And I did that for 3 years, along with the broadcast. And every year, the broadcast and the ways I would help out the marketing team or communications with Jared, all of those roles continued to increase year after year after year. But I did work with the groups team. And, there were days where the groups stuff was not fun. And it was the days in the summer are, hey, you want to come to a Reign game? Yeah, when's the season? Not for 4 months. Cool, well, do you have a schedule? No.
Yeah.
So tickets aren't available? No. And they're like, well, call me in 4 months.
Yeah.
I had that conversation 20 times in one day. Those days suck. But then when you get somebody on the phone even, and this is not even a broadcast side, but you get somebody on the phone that's like, hey, my son came out and played broom ball on the ice after the game with whatever elementary school with his friends. And today he starts his first day with the LA Junior Kings. And now he is, because he came to a game 3 years ago that cool. You helped bring us out to, he's now playing hockey and made the Junior Kings. And those are the moments where you're like, that's awesome. Every phone call that I've made today or every meeting I've had has been terrible, but those moments are really cool. And then the fact that for me growing up as a Kings fan that I get to do it here, just like you, is really cool as well. So that's those are the best parts. But you're right, there are things where it is a job and it's hard. It is a hard job, especially and I know that you can relate to this too, but there are some times where you're this is the organization that you grew up following. So sometimes it feels like maybe you have even higher standards of your own work because it's the Los Angeles Kings, right? That's kind of how I have felt. That's how I felt with the Reign. I didn't grow up an avid Reign fan, but I was aware of their existence and then followed them when I was in college. And then for that to be my first broadcast job out of school, out of nowhere really, was a dream come true that I could not have imagined. So I have felt like I have had higher standards for myself even. So it's hard. And I'm now that I'm with the Kings, I'm not doing 82 broadcasts this year, right? I'm not doing play-by-play for 82
not
games.
Not play-by-play, but you're going to be...
I'm involved,
yeah,
sure.
You're going to be around.
I'm not doing play-by-play for 82 games. So then when there are other things built into the job, it makes things hard. And there are hard days, but at the end of the day, it's the LA Kings and I grew up rooting for them. And it's not something that I would trade in a second. And it's the coolest thing.
You want to know the job that'll hurt your feelings, the worst job you could have as far as liking yourself and feeling like you're making a difference?
What?
Political canvassing.
Oh, did you do that?
Yeah, it's awful. It's so horrible. So I think I quit after 2 days. It's just the worst. And then when I get people at my door politically canvassing, I will just lay into them and be like, listen, I started off with, I've done this, so I know. So I apologize. This is nothing personal, but get away from me. I want you to broadcast in a Kings jersey. I know they won't let you. I know you won't do it. I know. I want you to. I want that to be your gimmick. I want you in a Kings jersey every game.
I can't do that.
All right, we're going to wrap it up because we've gone a lot longer than I thought we might. Josh Schaefer, thank you for joining me. And let's go take a look at that filing cabinet. And Kings fans, get used to his voice because you're going to be seeing a lot more of Josh Schaefer moving forward.
Yes, and I'll be back on All the Kings Men next week, too.
No. Hopefully not. Hopefully I've done a better job scheduling. No offense. But yeah, all right. Thanks for listening, Kings fans. We'll talk to you soon.